The voicemail is still on my phone. 6 years later, I haven't deleted it. Not because I'm sentimental. I'm really, really not. But because some mornings when I'm sitting in the corner office of a building I own outright, in a city that took me seriously before my own father did, I play it just to remember exactly what figure it out sounds like when it comes from someone who was supposed to be in your corner. His voice is warm on the recording. That's the part that gets me every time. Gerald Banks has the voice of a man who should be reading audiobooks. Deep, measured, the kind of baritone that makes you lean in at dinner parties. When he left me that voicemail, he sounded like he was doing me a favor. "Hey, Kira Bug. Got your message about the loan. Listen, I've been thinking about it, and you've always been so resourceful, kiddo. You're gonna figure it out. I believe in you. Love you, baby girl." 37 seconds. I know because I've played it enough times to know it by heart. The way you memorize a thing that hurt you so completely you need to keep the evidence close. The call came at 11:14 on a Tuesday night in September 2018, and I sat in the parking lot of a Wendy's on South Tryon Street and listened to it on repeat for 45 minutes. The Frosty I'd ordered was melting in my cup holder. The night shift workers at the drive-thru probably thought I was a health inspector who'd just received some catastrophic news. I was not a health inspector. I was a 28-year-old woman who had just been told, in the warmest possible voice, that she did not matter enough for 30 seconds of actual consideration. 3 months earlier, my father had wired $380,000 to my brother Tyler's bank account for a down payment on a house in Bridgemill Estates. He gave a speech at dinner about it. We were at my parents' house in Ballantyne. Nice neighborhood, the kind where every lawn looks professionally embarrassed to have grass on it instead of landscaping. And my father stood up at the head of the table with his glass of Merlot and said he wanted to talk about investing in family. "Tyler is building something," my father said. "He's got the house. He's got Amanda. They're talking about kids. That's legacy. That's what we do. We invest in the next generation." Tyler beamed. He actually beamed, the way golden children beam when they receive confirmation that the universe has correctly identified them as special. My sister-in-law Amanda put her hand over her heart. My mother, Patricia Banks, née Holloway, pressed her lips together in that way she has. That means she's either proud or suppressing a sentence she knows better than to say out loud. I smiled. I cut my chicken. I thought about the commercial real estate course I'd been auditing at UNC Charlotte, about the mixed-use development on Central Avenue I'd been watching for 6 months, about the $40,000 I needed to make a serious offer on a lease option that a developer named Marcus Webb was about to let expire. 3 months later, I called my father and asked to borrow $40,000 at whatever interest rate he wanted to charge, with a written repayment schedule, and he left me a voicemail. I want you to sit with that math for a second. $380,000, given freely, celebrated with Merlot and a speech about legacy. $40,000, offered as a loan with interest, answered with 37 seconds of warm dismissal. That's not a typo. That's just my family. Here's what you need to understand about Gerald Banks before I tell you everything else. He is not a villain. I need you to hear that, because this story goes places that might make you want to cast him as one, and he doesn't quite fit the costume. My father is a man who genuinely believes he is fair. He spent 31 years as a VP at First Carolina Trust. He mentored young bankers. He gave to his church. He coached Tyler's Little League team, and he came to my college graduation. And he hugged me at the airport the first time I flew home from my first real job in Raleigh. He loves me. I am reasonably certain of this. He just doesn't see me the same way he sees Tyler. I don't think he knows he does it. That's the thing about lifelong bias. It lives in the subconscious like a tenant who's been there so long they stop paying rent and start leaving dishes in the sink. And you stop noticing because they've always been there. My father would be genuinely hurt if you told him he favored his son. He would list every nice thing he'd ever done for me. He would miss the point so completely that the point would file a missing persons report. Tyler is 3 years older than me, easygoing in the way that comes naturally to people who've never had to fight for the narrative about themselves. And he has the particular obliviousness of someone who received his advantages so early that he genuinely can't see them anymore. He's not cruel, he's just comfortable. There's a version of Tyler Banks who, raised differently, might have been someone who noticed things. Instead, he is someone who received a $380,000 gift and sent my father a framed photo of the house for Father's Day. I don't hate my brother. I don't even resent him. Exactly. I resent the structure that made him. My mother is a different conversation. Patricia Banks operates in a register I've spent 34 years trying to decode, and I'm still working on it. She sees more than she says. She said more at that dinner than she appeared to. She passed me the rolls without being asked, and touched my shoulder when she walked past and said, very quietly, "You're going to do something with yourself, Kira." I didn't know if that was comfort or prophecy or an apology she couldn't figure out how to hand me directly. Probably all three. My mother communicates in subtext the way some people communicate in foreign languages. Fluently, efficiently, and in ways that require translation. And then there's me, Kira Renee Banks, 28 years old in September 2018, sitting in a Wendy's parking lot with a melting Frosty and a voicemail on loop. Business degree from NC State. 2 years at a property management company in Raleigh. 1 year back in Charlotte, renting a 2-bedroom apartment I could technically afford if I was very careful about technically. Watching commercial real estate like other people watch the stock market. Obsessively, with a yellow legal pad and a habit of driving past vacant storefronts and narrating their potential to myself like I was hosting a show nobody had greenlit yet. This is the part where I'm supposed to tell you I was perfect and disciplined and visionary from the very beginning, but here's my protagonist fallibility. Served up on time because I promised this story would be honest. I was also scared. More scared than I let anyone see. I second-guessed myself constantly. I had a folder on my laptop called What If I'm Wrong that contained approximately 400 pages of notes documenting all the ways my real estate ideas might fail. I called Deja Washington at 11 o'clock at night to read her market analysis, the way other people call their mothers to say they're having a bad day. Which is to say, frequently and desperately, and with more need underneath the professional veneer than I would have admitted under oath. Deja Washington deserves her own introduction. 40 years old in 2018, commercial real estate investor, owner of 7 properties in the Charlotte metro area, one of approximately 12 Black women in the city who were playing at the level I wanted to reach. I'd met her at a networking event the previous spring. She'd been the keynote speaker. I'd been in the back row with my legal pad, and she'd said something that hit me so directly it felt personal. The market doesn't know your father's opinion of you. Neither does the bank. Walk in like the numbers are the only thing in the room. I introduced myself afterward, and she gave me her card with the energy of someone who hands out cards strategically, not scattershot. 2 weeks later, I emailed her a 12-page analysis of the Central Avenue mixed-use opportunity. She responded in 45 minutes. "This is good work. Call me." That's how you get a mentor. You do the work so well that someone too busy to waste time chooses to make time. Deja had capital. She also had something I couldn't manufacture, a network. But when I told her about the Marcus Webb lease option in October 2018, after the voicemail, after the Wendy's parking lot, after I'd dried my eyes and driven home and made a decision in the elevator up to my apartment that I was not going to let 37 seconds be the last word on my life, she didn't hand me money. She did something more valuable. She said, Come to the bank meeting with me on Thursday. Wear the Navy suit. The First Carolina Trust Branch on South Boulevard has the particular atmosphere of an institution that knows it's important and wants you to know it knows. High ceilings. That specific shade of beige they teach in bank design school. The kind of carpeting that absorbs sound and anxiety in equal measure. I'd been in this branch before. It was my father's bank. Had been for 31 years. He'd had his name on a plaque in the conference room until the year before he retired. I wore the Navy suit. I brought the 12-page analysis, updated to 18 pages. I had my credit score memorized, my debt-to-income ratio rehearsed, every number I'd ever touched prepared to be cited without hesitation. Deja sat beside me, calm as weather that hadn't decided yet what it wanted to do. The loan officer's name was Bradley Marsh. He was the kind of man who looks like he was assembled from a catalog for regional bank manager. Khaki, wire-rimmed glasses, the handshake of someone who learned handshakes from a seminar. He reviewed my materials with the careful blankness of a man who had already made a decision and was looking for paperwork to support it. "Ms. Banks," he said, about 20 minutes in, setting my documents down in a way that told me everything. The property analysis is thorough, but we have concerns about the risk profile here. What specific concerns? I asked. Deja had told me. Always ask for specifics. Generalities are where denials go to hide. The lease option structure, the anchor tenant situation, your personal capital reserves. My reserves are documented on page 7. I have 18 months of operating capital at projected expense levels. Right. He clicked his pen. It's just, this is a significant ask for someone with your limited track record. My limited track record. I was 28. I had 2 years of property management experience, a perfect payment history on every financial obligation I'd ever had, an 18-page analysis that Deja Washington, who he absolutely recognized, had vouched for by sitting next to me. My limited track record. I looked at Deja. She looked back at me with an expression that said, "I know. Stay in the room." "I understand the concern," I said. "I'd like to discuss what conditions would make this application successful." Bradley Marsh cleared his throat. "We'll be in touch." He was in touch 4 days later. Denied. The reason I'm telling you this particular detail, and this is the part that took me 2 years to find out, and when I found out I had to go sit in my car for a while for the second time in my adult life, is that Bradley Marsh had a conversation with someone before our meeting. Not after. Before. My father had been a VP at First Carolina Trust for 31 years. He still golfed with 3 members of the board. And someone, I found out later from a paralegal who used to date a guy who played golf with one of those board members. I know. Charlotte is a large city that operates like a small town when it wants to. Someone with a familiar baritone and impeccable timing had made a phone call. Not to destroy me. I don't think it was that calculated. Gerald Banks does not have a villain's commitment to the plan. I think he made a call the way he made the voicemail, with warmth, with genuine belief that he was helping, probably framed as concern. My daughter's going into commercial real estate. She's talented but green. I just don't want her to overextend herself. I know you'll handle it appropriately. He would not have seen it as sabotage. He would have seen it as protecting me. He protected me right out of my first real opportunity and went home and slept peacefully because he believed, in the marrow of his good and limited bones, that resourceful people figure things out. I found out about the phone call on a Wednesday afternoon in July 2020, 18 months later, and I cried for approximately 20 minutes, and then I called Deja and told her, and she was silent for a long time, and then she said, "Okay, now you know exactly what you're working with. What are you going to do with that information?" I didn't do anything with it, Not directly. Not to him. I did something with it to the market instead. The Marcus Webb lease option did expire. I lost that one. I'm not going to pretend I didn't. The story where everything works perfectly from the jump is not this story. And if someone's selling you that version of a real estate journey, check their footnotes. I lost the Central Avenue deal. I spent 3 months feeling like I'd had my legs kicked out. And then I got up off the metaphorical floor of my apartment, which was literal floor. I was sitting on the rug reading the denial letter again. And I called Deja and said, "What's next?" "There's a fourplex on Beatty's Ford Road," she said. "Not sexy. Good bones. The owner's motivated." "Not sexy. Good bones. Motivated owner." I wrote it on my legal pad. Here's what I had. $9,000 in savings, a defeated loan application in my file, and a father who had described me as resourceful while actively working to make sure my resources stayed limited. Here's what I did with that. I went to 3 different credit unions, not big banks, credit unions, who were not in my father's golf network, and I made my case. I was 29 by then. I had my denial letter from First Carolina Trust, which I presented not as a failure, but as data. "Here's what a traditional bank missed," I said to a loan officer at Charlotte Metro Credit Union named Patricia, different Patricia, who had the look of someone who'd been underestimated herself and recognized the species on sight. "Here's why I think that's their problem, not mine." She approved a $47,000 loan at 6.8% interest. I bought the fourplex on Beatty's Ford Road for $188,000 in March 2019. I put tenants in all 4 units within 60 days. I made my first loan payment exactly on time and every payment after that exactly on time. And by December of that year, the building was generating $2,100 monthly profit after expenses, and I was lying on my living room rug again, but this time differently. I'm going to skip some time on you because YouTube videos have runtime considerations, and also because the years between 2019 and 2022 are dense, with the particular grind of building something from nothing, which is important but not always cinematic. The short version: fourplex to triplex to small retail strip in Noda. Refinance the fourplex at a better rate. Used equity to lever into a warehouse conversion in South End. Deja invested alongside me twice, separately from her own holdings, which in mentor language means she was putting money behind her faith in my judgment, which is the kind of validation you can't manufacture. I hired a property manager. I hired a bookkeeper. I stopped working the other jobs I'd been working. I'd been doing property management consulting on the side for 18 months, and I worked for myself full-time in the spring of 2021. My father asked at Easter how the real estate hobby was going. I said, "Growing." My mother passed me the rolls. Tyler, who had been in Bridgemill Estates for 3 years by then, was talking about whether to renovate the kitchen or put in a pool. His house had appreciated. The neighborhood had good values. One of the reasons it had good values: the commercial anchor that made the retail cluster near the development functional and attractive, that kept foot traffic moving through the area, that made the strip mall half a mile from his gated entrance an asset rather than an eyesore, was a lease held by a regional grocery chain I'm going to call Anchor Foods, because I'm being slightly creative with specifics here, while keeping everything else true. Anchor Foods' lease was a 7-year deal with a 10-year option. In the spring of 2022, they announced they were not exercising the option. Corporate restructuring. 3 locations closing. The Bridgemill adjacent strip mall was one of them. I found out about this the way I found out about most commercial real estate opportunities in Charlotte by then. I had developed the habit of knowing things. Specifically, I had developed a relationship with a commercial broker named Kevin Osei, who had the square footage of every significant retail property in the Charlotte Metro cataloged in his head like a man possessed, and when I called him on a Tuesday morning in April to talk about his pipeline, he mentioned the Bridge Mill Strip Mall as a B-tier distressed opportunity. Small mall, 12 units, anchor pulling out, nervous smaller tenants, owner who had bought it as a retirement investment and was now very interested in a conversation. "What's the ask?" I said. "He'll take 2.4, Kevin said. "Probably settle at 2.2 with the right buyer." I wrote $2.2 million on my legal pad. Underneath it I wrote, "Tyler's neighborhood." I want to be honest with you about what I felt in that moment. I'm not going to tell you I was purely strategic and unaffected. There was something hot in my chest that I'd be lying if I called anything other than satisfaction. The particular sensation of a circle bending toward closure. But I also want to be clear about what I was not doing. I was not buying this property to hurt anyone. I was not buying it to make a point, to stage a scene, to orchestrate a confrontation. I was buying it because it was a good opportunity in a market I understood, at a price that worked with my portfolio strategy. And the fact that it was near my brother's house was, I'm being very precise here, a bonus. The existence is the revenge. I didn't manufacture that. The market did it. I called Deja. "The Bridge Mill Strip," I said. She said, the particular of a woman who already knew. "You knew about this." I heard something. "Why didn't you call me?" "I wanted to see if you'd find it yourself." A pause. "You found it yourself." The acquisition took 4 months. Summer of 2022, negotiating from a position of patience while the owner, a man named Harold Stokes, who had bought the strip as his retirement plan and was watching it wobble, got progressively more motivated. Kevin brokered. I made my first offer at $1.95 million, which Harold rejected with the indignation of a man who hadn't yet accepted his situation. I waited. Harold watched another tenant threaten to leave. I came back at $2.1 million with a fast close and a clean offer letter, and Harold accepted before I finished the sentence. The financing was different by then. I had assets. I had 3 years of documented performance across a portfolio that had grown to 11 properties. I did not go to First Carolina Trust. I went to 2 banks, one of them a regional commercial lender out of Atlanta that had no idea who my father was, and no interest in who he golfed with. And I got a loan commitment in 3 weeks at terms I was satisfied with. The day I signed the purchase agreement, I went back to that Wendy's on South Tryon Street. I ordered a Frosty. I ate the whole thing this time. I did not play the voicemail in the parking lot. I drove back to my office. I had an office by then, leased space in a building I was fairly certain I'd buy within 2 years. And I sat at my desk and thought about Harold Stokes and vacant anchor slots and what the right tenant mix was going to look like for a 12-unit strip anchored by nothing. I thought about the neighborhoods around it and what they needed. I thought about a regional urgent care group that had been looking for a Charlotte area location. I thought about a specialty grocer, smaller than Anchor Foods, more curated. The kind that does well in stable middle-income neighborhoods with good residential density. I thought about a gym. I thought about work. Because that's what I do when the emotional significance of something threatens to become louder than the logistics. I go back to the work. By October 2022, I had signed an anchor lease with a specialty grocer called Garden District Market, signed secondary leases with the Urgent Care Group and a regional gym chain, and a dry cleaner and a sandwich place that had been looking to expand, and the strip mall near Bridge Mill Estates had an 87% occupancy rate and a projected annual NOI that justified the acquisition price 3 times over. Kevin Osei sent me a congratulations text with a chart attached that I printed and put on my wall. My portfolio was, at that point, worth approximately $3.7 million. I was 32. My father, around this time, Called to tell me Tyler was thinking about refinancing the Bridgemill house because values had held so well. He was proud. He told me about Tyler's equity like he was reading scripture. I said, "That's great, Dad." "You should think about home ownership yourself," he said, with the gentle concern of a man who had no idea he was talking to someone who owned 12 pieces of commercial real estate. Building equity. "I'm working on it," I said. My mother, who was in the background of the call and is either psychic or more informed than she admits, said loudly enough for me to hear, "Gerald, leave her alone." He laughed. My mother never explains herself. The call ended warmly, the way our calls always end. Warmly, pleasantly, across a chasm neither of us officially acknowledges. I hung up and added 2 more properties to my acquisition pipeline. By January 2024, the portfolio had crossed $4.2 million in assessed value. I had it appraised because I was considering a private credit facility, and the appraiser, a methodical man named Terrence who did not engage in small talk, handed me the report in a manila envelope and said, "You've been busy." I had been busy. $4.2 million. A fourplex on Beatties Ford Road, warehouses, retail strips, the strip mall near Bridgemill Estates, a small office building in Plaza Midwood that I was particularly proud of because the renovation had been complicated, and I'd managed it without losing my mind more than 3 times. An entity structure Deja's attorney had helped me set up, that was clean and properly capitalized, and exactly as professional as anything my father had built in 31 years of banking. "Figure it out," he'd said, in 37 seconds, with a warm voice, over a voicemail, instead of a conversation. I had figured it out. The question was whether I was going to let anyone know. The Thanksgiving invitation came in October. My parents' house, Ballantine, the usual assembly. Me, Tyler, and Amanda, their 2 kids who were 4 and 6 and genuinely delightful in the way children are when they're too young to have absorbed any family dynamics yet. My Aunt Rochelle, who drives from Greensboro and always brings sweet potatoes that are objectively better than anything else on the table. My mother's college roommate Sandra, who comes every few years and provides the useful social function of someone who is entirely outside the family's emotional weather systems. I said yes. I always say yes. I'm aware of what that says about me. I should tell you about the weeks leading up to Thanksgiving, because they contain a detail that is either meaningful or completely coincidental, depending on how much you believe the universe has a dramatic sensibility. In early November, Tyler called me. He calls me 4 or 5 times a year, the kind of calls that are warm but content light, checking in, chatting, the relationship maintenance of a brother who genuinely likes his sister but has not had occasion to pay close attention to her life because nothing in his worldview has required it. But this call was different. He sounded slightly tighter than usual, the vocal equivalent of a shirt that fits wrong. "You still doing the real estate thing?" he asked. "Still doing it. Commercial, right? Not residential?" "Mostly commercial. Some mixed use." I was careful here. Not deceptive. I don't do deception, but careful. I could feel him working up to something. "So, this might be a weird question," he said. "But do you know anything about the strip mall situation near Bridgemill? There's been some talk in the neighborhood association about the anchor tenant change, and whether it's going to affect property values." I was standing in my kitchen when he asked this. I set down my coffee mug with the particular deliberateness of someone who needs to have both hands free for a conversation. "What kind of talk?" I said. "People are nervous," he said. "The old grocery was there for 7 years. The new place, Garden District, whatever, nobody knows it. And the gym's new. There's just some uncertainty. Garden District has 12 locations in the southeast," I said. "Average consumer spend is 23% higher than regional grocery chains. The anchor switch is an upgrade for foot traffic quality. Silence. How do you know that? Tyler said. I follow the Charlotte commercial market, I said, which was true, and also roughly equivalent to saying, I follow my own breathing. Huh, he said. That's actually good to hear. Maybe I should come talk to you before the next neighborhood association meeting. Maybe, I said. I hung up and stood in my kitchen for a while. The coffee had gone slightly cold. Outside the window, Charlotte was doing its November thing. That particular quality of southern autumn light that is gold and thin and a little elegiac, like the year is apologizing for having to end. I thought about Tyler standing in a neighborhood association meeting defending the strip mall next to his house without knowing his sister owned it. I thought about my father with his Merlot and his speech about legacy. I thought about 37 seconds. I thought about Thanksgiving. Here's what I want to say about what I did next, because I need you to understand my state of mind precisely. I did not plan a reveal. I did not rehearse a speech. I did not go to Thanksgiving with a folder of documents under my arm and a PowerPoint loaded on my phone. That's not who I am. Or rather, it's not who I want to be, and on the days when I'm doing it right, it's not who I am. I went to Thanksgiving because my family was having Thanksgiving, and because my Aunt Rochelle makes sweet potatoes that I have been unable to replicate for 6 years, and because my mother would worry if I didn't come, and because some part of me, the part that sat in the Wendy's parking lot, the part that cried for 20 minutes in a parking garage when she found out about the phone call, needed to be in the same room as my father and be whole. That's it. That's all I went for. What happened at dinner is what happened. I didn't engineer it. The universe has a dramatic sensibility, and sometimes it works without you. Thanksgiving at my parents' house smells like sweet potato and brown sugar and the particular cedar of my father's study leaking into the hallway, and my mother's perfume, which is the same perfume she's worn since 1987, and at this point smells like home to me in a way I'd be embarrassed to say out loud. The kids were running through the house when I arrived. My nephew Marcus with turkey-themed socks I was immediately jealous of. My niece Chloe in a dress with a collar I recognized as belonging to a phase Amanda was in. Tyler was in the kitchen helping set up, which meant he was standing near the kitchen talking to my father while my mother and Aunt Rochelle actually prepared things. Aunt Rochelle hugged me hard and said, "You look different," which from her means something has shifted in you and she approves. We ate at 2:30. My father said grace with the gravitas of a man who genuinely believes in what he's saying. And whatever else I have to say about Gerald Banks, his prayers are real. He thanked God for family, for health, for abundance, for the next generation. He looked at Tyler's kids when he said that last part. He looked at me during health. I noticed this. I ate my turkey. We were on dessert, my mother's peach cobbler, which deserves its own documentary. When Sandra, sitting across from me, asked what everyone had been working on lately, the kind of question that gets asked at family dinners when conversation needs a formal structure. Tyler talked about a project at work. Amanda talked about her consulting practice. My father talked about his consulting work, which is mostly informal advising for former colleagues at First Carolina Trust. Sandra looked at me. "Kira," she said, with the genuine interest of someone who has no stake in the answer. "What are you up to these days? Last I heard you were doing real estate?" "Still doing real estate," I said. "Commercial?" my father said, from the head of the table, with the fond amusement of a man talking about a hobby. "Still with that?" And here's the thing. Here is the exact thing. I could have said yes, still with that, and moved on. That was an option. I want to acknowledge that I had the option. Instead, I said, "The portfolio hit $4.2 million in assessed value in January." The table was quiet for exactly 2 seconds. I'm sorry, my father said. Total portfolio. 14 properties, mostly commercial, some mixed use. The appraisal came back in January. I cut a piece of cobbler. I've been meaning to mention it. $4.2 million, my mother said, in a tone that was not surprised, which told me that she had known something was happening and had been waiting for the room to catch up. 4.2, I said, including a strip mall acquisition near Bridge Mill Estates. Tyler put his fork down. Near, he said. The one with Garden District Market as the anchor, I said. And the urgent care, and the gym. I acquired it in 2022. That's why I knew the tenant mix when you called in November. The silence this time was longer. My Aunt Rochelle made a sound that I believe was suppressed delight. Sandra, to her credit, sat perfectly still, like a woman who has learned the value of not inserting herself into the middle of a family moment. My father looked at me. Gerald Banks, 62 years old, retired bank VP, man with a baritone built for audiobooks and a 37-second voicemail still living on my phone, looked at his daughter, and I watched something move across his face that I have thought about many times since, and still can't fully name. Pride, maybe. Confusion. The particular disorientation of a man encountering a reality that doesn't match the map he's been using. How long? He said slowly. Has this been going on? 6 years, I said. Since September 2018, more or less. September 2018. The month of the voicemail. The month of the Wendy's parking lot. The month my father told me I was resourceful. He heard it. I know he heard it, because I watched him hear it. Watched the connection travel across his face like weather moving in. And for a moment, Gerald Banks looked genuinely old in a way he hadn't looked before. Not frail. Old. The kind of old that comes from understanding something you can't ununderstand. Kira, he said. Dad, I said. I didn't. He stopped. Started again. When you asked for the loan, I didn't think. I know, I said. And this is the part where I want to be honest with you, because this story is not actually about revenge, and I need the ending to tell the truth. I did know. I knew my father hadn't thought. That was the problem. Not malice, not calculation, not the phone call to Bradley Marsh even, though I'm still working through that one. But the absence of thought. The assumption that the resourceful one would figure it out, because she always did. Because she was Kira, and Kira was fine. Kira didn't need the investment. Tyler needed the investment because Tyler was building something. The assumption that what Tyler was building was more real than what I might build. I know you didn't, I said. I didn't bring this up to. I paused. I just thought you should know. My mother was very still in her chair. Not the stillness of someone who is surprised, the stillness of someone who has been waiting a long time for a particular moment to arrive and is now simply present for it. Tyler said, I'm sorry. Are you saying you own the strip mall next to my neighborhood? I own the entity that holds the lease, I said. It's an LLC, but yes. Did you know about the neighborhood association thing? I knew. I said. Tyler looked at me for a long moment. My brother, 37 years old, easygoing, comfortable, the golden child who received a $380,000 gift and sent a framed photo for Father's Day. He opened his mouth, and then he closed it, and then he opened it again and said, The Garden District thing. You were right, by the way. People have mostly come around. Property values are holding. I know, I said. I watch that. You watch your own investment. I watch my own investment. He picked his fork back up. He ate a bite of cobbler. And then he said quietly, the way Tyler Banks says things when he's actually meaning them rather than filling conversational space. I didn't know you were doing all that, Kira. I I should have paid more attention. Yeah, I said. You should have. This is the moment I want to be careful about, because it would be easy to make my brother the full villain here, and he is not. He's a man who didn't look closely enough. A man who took his advantages the way air is taken, without awareness, because you don't notice what costs you nothing. There's a version of Tyler that needed to be told, and now he was being told, and the question of what he did with that information was going to be answered over years, not Thanksgiving. My father was still quiet. I looked at him. He looked back. I made a call, he said, very quietly, not a question. I know, I said, to First Carolina. I know. He closed his eyes. Gerald Banks, the man who coached Little League and mentored young bankers and gave 37-second voicemails instead of conversations. He closed his eyes for just a moment, and when he opened them, he looked like he'd decided something. I thought I was protecting you, he said. I know that too, I said. That's the part that took me the longest to stop being angry about. My mother stood up and began collecting dessert plates, which is what she does when she needs something to do with her hands that isn't crying. Aunt Rochelle touched my arm once, briefly, the way she's touched my arm since I was 8 years old and needed someone to acknowledge something without making it a production. $4.2 million, my father said, finally, to his plate, to the table, to whatever version of himself had described me as his resourceful daughter and meant it as a ceiling rather than a floor. Almost $4.3, I said. There's a property in Plaza Midwood I'm refinancing in Q1. He looked up at me, and Gerald Banks, in that moment, with his Merlot and his cobbler, and his 31 years of banking expertise sitting across from his daughter who had built a portfolio in the gap he'd left her, made a sound that I can only describe as something breaking loose inside him that had been stuck for a long time. Not a sob, not quite a laugh. Something in between that belongs to the specific emotional frequency of recognition. Tell me about it, he said. About what? The Plaza Midwood property. Tell me about it. And so I did. I sat at my parents' Thanksgiving table and told my father about a small office building in Plaza Midwood that I had acquired for $340,000, renovated over 14 months, and was currently valued at $780,000. I told him about the tenant mix and the financing structure and why I'd chosen the location. He asked questions, real questions, the questions of a former bank VP who knows what he's talking about, the questions he would have asked in a meeting. My mother came back from the kitchen and sat down. Tyler leaned in. Even Sandra was listening. It was the conversation I had needed to have 6 years earlier, and I was having it now, which is not the same thing and is also exactly what was available. The kids had gone back to running through the house. I could hear Marcus's turkey socks squeaking on the hardwood. I'm going to tell you something about the drive home from Thanksgiving that I haven't told anyone except Deja. And I told Deja because Deja is the kind of person who receives information without making it about herself or offering unsolicited meaning, which is rarer than you'd think. I cried in the car for about 20 minutes. Not the kind of crying I did in the Wendy's parking lot. That was grief adjacent, the sharp, specific grief of being dismissed by someone who should have seen you. This was something different. The kind of crying that happens when a thing you've been carrying releases, like setting down a bag you've been holding for so long you'd forgotten you were holding it. My father had not apologized exactly. He had acknowledged. There's a difference, and I'm still deciding how I feel about which one I needed more. Maybe the acknowledgement was the thing, the bare recognition that he had made a call he shouldn't have made, that his protection had the shape of a cage, that the daughter he'd described as resourceful had in fact been resourceful in ways he hadn't imagined, and hadn't helped, and had, in one specific case, actively worked against. He'd asked about the Plaza Midwood property. He'd asked good questions. That was something. Not everything. Something. I called Deja when I got home. "How was it?" she said. "Messy," I said. "Necessary." "Did you plan the big reveal?" "No." "That's what I thought. How'd it land?" He made a face like someone had rearranged his furniture while he was sleeping. Deja laughed. "Good." "I cried in the car," I said. "Also good." I was sitting in my living room, shoes off, Charlotte visible through the window in its winter evening mode, the city's skyline going amber and glass in the distance, a skyline I had watched for 6 years like a person watching something they intend to be part of. I had 2 properties visible from this window if you knew where to look. I did know where to look. "Deja," I said. Was it worth it? All of it. The whole. I made a gesture at 6 years that she couldn't see. Was the portfolio worth it? As a thing to have done? Separate from everything else? She was quiet for a moment. Deja Washington is constitutionally opposed to cheap reassurance, which is one of the reasons her reassurance means something when it comes. "When I gave my first keynote," she said, "I had a woman in the back row with a yellow legal pad who was writing down everything I said. I gave her my card because I thought, that's someone who builds things. That's someone who takes information and turns it into action." A pause. "You're asking me if it was worth it. Kira, go look at your portfolio and ask yourself that question." I already knew the answer. I just needed to hear myself give it. "Yeah," I said. It was. The voicemail. I need to come back to the voicemail because this story started with it and it has to end with it. And I've been carrying it for 6 years. And here's what I know about carrying things. There comes a point where the carrying stops being useful, where the evidence you've been holding close has already been used, has already shaped everything it was going to shape, and the act of keeping it is no longer a preparation for something. It's just wait. I played it one more time in my office the week after Thanksgiving. Sat at my desk, which is in a building I lease and will likely acquire in 2025, if the numbers stay where they are, in Charlotte, North Carolina, in a city that took me seriously before my father did, in a life I built out of a dismissal, and a legal pad, and a credit union loan, and a mentor who recognized something in the back row of a keynote. "Hey, Kira Bug. Got your message about the loan. Listen, I've been thinking about it and..." "You've always been so resourceful, kiddo. You're gonna figure it out. I believe in you. Love you, baby girl." 37 seconds. His voice is warm. That's still the thing that gets me. That's always been the thing. He wasn't being cruel. He was being absent. Blindly, warmly, familiarly absent, in the way that the people who should see you most clearly sometimes fail to see you at all. Not because they don't love you, but because love alone doesn't guarantee attention, doesn't guarantee equity, doesn't guarantee that when you ask for $40,000 as a loan with interest and a repayment schedule, you will get a conversation instead of a voicemail. But here's the thing. I've had 6 years to figure out. He was also right. Not in the way he intended. Not in the way of, don't worry, you'll be fine. Run along now. I have golf on Saturday and a son who needs a $380,000 down payment and a daughter who is resourceful and will sort herself out. Not in that way. In this way. I did figure it out. I figured it out with 14 properties and $4.2 million in assessed value, and a portfolio I built in the margin of what he left me. I figured it out with Deja Washington's business card and a 12-page analysis and a credit union loan, and 4 years of driving past strip malls and warehouses the way other people drive past scenery, seeing what they were instead of what they looked like. I figured it out in Charlotte in September and November and the February, when I closed my second acquisition, and the March when I finally stopped working 2 jobs, and the October when I bought the strip mall near my brother's house and ate a Frosty in a Wendy's parking lot like a person paying a debt to a previous version of herself. Figure it out was meant to dismiss me. I turned it into a business plan, and now I'm sitting here with the voicemail open on my phone, and my father and I have a phone call scheduled for next Tuesday to talk about the Plaza Midwood refinance, because he asked and I said yes. And my brother texted me last week asking if I'd come to the neighborhood association meeting in January, because apparently his neighbors want to talk about bringing in a coffee shop, and he thought I might have opinions about commercial lease structures. I do have opinions about commercial lease structures. I have approximately 900 opinions about commercial lease structures. Tyler is not forgiven for what he didn't do, which is notice. My father is not forgiven for what he did, which is the voicemail and the phone call and the 31 years of looking at his daughter and seeing someone resourceful instead of someone building. These things happened. They live in the past, but the past is not sealed. It connects forward. It shapes the present. It sits at Thanksgiving tables and drives home and cries in cars. I'm not carrying a grudge. I am carrying an accurate accounting. The difference matters. I press delete. The voicemail is gone. 37 seconds, 6 years, 14 properties, 1 strip mall, 1 Wendy's parking lot, 2 instances of crying in cars, 1 Thanksgiving table, 1 conversation about a Plaza Midwood office building, 1 version of a woman who was told to figure it out, and did. Deleted. Filed. Done. I set my phone down on my desk, in my office, in my building, in my city. Outside the window, Charlotte is going about its business, skyline glittering against a December afternoon that can't decide if it wants to be cold. Somewhere south of here, in Bridge Mill Estates, my brother's house is sitting on land that appreciates partly because of a strip mall I own. Somewhere in Ballantyne, my father is probably in his study, probably thinking about Tuesday's call, probably trying on a version of himself that sees his daughter clearly enough to ask good questions. My mother is almost certainly in the kitchen doing something that doesn't need doing because she processes things with movement, with usefulness, with her hands. The voicemail is gone. What I built is still here. He told me to figure it out. That's the last thing I want to say. He told me to figure it out. And I did. And I want you, whoever you are, watching this, wherever you are, with your own voicemail or your own parking lot or your own version of 37 seconds delivered warmly by someone who should have known better. I want you to hear this. That dismissal is information. The people who should invest in you and don't are telling you, with their absence, where the gap is. And gaps, in my experience, in my professional and deeply personal experience, are where you build. Figure it out. I did. Kira Banks is a commercial real estate investor based in Charlotte, North Carolina. Her portfolio, as of January 2024, is valued at $4.2 million. She drove past the strip mall near Bridge Mill Estates last week on her way to a site visit, and she didn't stop because she didn't need to. She already knew what was there.